Thank you.
I will start admitting people.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. We have a lot of folks still logging in, so I'll give it a minute or two before we get started. All right, looks like it's slowing down just a little bit. So today we'll start with a couple of poll questions. I'll go ahead and launch those for you. And I'll give just another minute for folks to continue coming in and taking a look at the poll questions for today. All right, I'll go ahead and end the poll. Thank you all for those responses. And to start off today, we have a few announcements from Allison Lakin.
Okay, thanks, Jema. Just really, most of these are save the dates. So hopefully most of you saw that the Chancellor's State of Campus will be on November 16th at 4 p.m. And if I remember correctly, it's in person or Zoom, that one. Dr. Flagg will be doing State of Research. The save the date for that hasn't gone out yet, so you haven't missed it. But if you want to get it on your calendars, it's December 12th at 12 o'clock. And that'll be the same. That'll be, I think, in person. Is it all Zoom, Natasha, or is it in person and Zoom?
We're still finalizing the best way, if that's going to be hybrid or just in Zoom. So more to come.
Okay. We are doing a follow-up recruitment workshop that will be kind of an orientation to the language around DEI and community engagement. So I thank Don Neese and Montel Temez, who are going to talk today in advance for partnering on that. That will be Wednesday, November 8th at 9 a.m. and it will be Zoom only, that one. And then last but not least, hopefully you've all seen that the CU Anschutz Research Awards nominations are out and due by November 17th. So please, if you want to nominate researchers or research teams, it's a fun event, and it's just a nice way of recognizing some of the cool work that goes on. So please, make your nominations. I think that's everything. Thanks, Jema.
Yeah, Allison. And as Allison mentioned, we have Don Neese and Montel Temez to speak with us today from the CCTSI and tell us a bit more about their community engagement program. So I will go ahead and give you all the floor.
All right, thanks, Jema. Let me share my slides here. Just a second. All right. Can everybody see that? Great. All right. Well, thanks, Jema and the team for the invitation today to say a few words about our community engagement and health equity core that's part of the CCTSI infrastructure. here on our campus. We used to be known as Community Engagement and Research, recently changed to Community Engagement and Health Equity, and it's a change that I think really reflects the fact that health equity and community engagement are so closely tied up together. If you're doing work that with the goal of impacting health disparities, you need to be engaging the community. So here to tell you a little bit about resources that we have that are available to help you in that work. So this is kind of our statement of purpose. We were created by the CCTSI to transform the way communities and researchers work together. We build bridges between health research, clinical practice, and community health initiatives. So we do a lot of partnership convening, building. I'll tell you a little bit about how we do that, some of the resources that we have for that. We feel that a really important part of our mission is to build capacity to conduct community engaged research, and that's building capacity both here on our campus, but also in our communities, so that folks can partner in an authentic and equitable way across the community academic sides. We're really committed to infusing community engagement throughout the translational research spectrum to make sure that the work that's being done is community responsive. And then finally, translating and disseminating discoveries into community and practice is an important aspect too, making sure that the science that's being done on our campus and elsewhere is being translated in a way that it makes sense to folks in the community and that they're able to make use of it. So our infrastructure is basically made up of, at a very broad, high level, of these 4 different resources. Our PACT, or our Partnership of Academicians and Communities for Translation, that's really our organizational governance infrastructure. So there's a PACT Council, which is a 14-member body. Half of those folks are researchers, investigators from our campus, and also folks from our CCTSI partner institutions like Colorado State. And the other half, the other 7 PACT Council members, are community members. We have community members that have leadership roles in community-based organizations, community members that have come to our attention because of our work in communities and their advocacy for community in the context of research, and it's a great group. Next over is our community research liaisons. We currently have about 10 of these folks. These are folks that we actually support about a quarter of their time on average to really serve as a bridge between the campus and community. Each of them is embedded in a specific community. So that could be our urban Hispanic Latinx community here in the Denver area. Could be our LGBTQ community. There's a list of these folks on our website, which I'll point out later, but we really rely on those folks to help us understand what's going on in those communities, what the issues are, and also they help us with a lot of our training programs and capacity building as well. Next over is Trailhead Institute. Trailhead Institute is a nonprofit public health institute that is a partner for us in our pilot grant programs. They help to ensure that folks on the community side of those pilot grant programs are, there's capacity building in terms of what it means to receive federal grant dollars. They help ensure that community members that are part of projects get paid on time in a timely fashion, something that isn't always easy from the university side. And they're really thought partners with us as well in terms of the directionality of our work and what the needs are both here locally and around the state. And then last but not least is SNOCAP. SNOCAP is our practice-based research network infrastructure that's largely based in the Department of Family Medicine. Works with about 280 practices around the state to do research in those practices to help them improve, basically bring state-of-the-art care to the patients that they serve in locations all around the state. So that's the basic infrastructure. Just a few more words about our community research liaisons. These are some of the roles that they serve in their communities. They serve as facilitators. They occasionally take on the role of a research assistant. They're educators. They look out for their community, ensure that work that's being done is done in a respectful and authentic way. They're advocates, ambassadors, and they also do some matchmaking. So when we have researchers that approach us that are interested in doing a project in a particular community, oftentimes we'll engage one of our CRLs to help see where the right match or fit might be for the project, the investigators with a particular community-based organization or group of community members. These are the programs and services that we provide. Pilot grant funding. We have a two-tiered infrastructure for pilot grants that starts with a partnership development grant if you really need that time to develop relationships with a community partner, and then a follow-on grant to actually pilot some work with that community partner. We do consultations with folks here on our campus about any topic related to community engagement and research. We do a lot of one-on-one kind of technical assistance kind of work, guidance on working in various kinds of communities. We can help with creating engagement plans. So if folks are preparing grant proposals, that sort of thing, we can help out with those things. I already mentioned connections through our CRLs and our PAC Council. And we can also do facilitation as well. Just in terms of education and training, we have a research readiness program that I mentioned that really helps prepare community-based organizations to be effective and valuable partners for folks in research. We're now, for a little over 3 years, been doing our quarterly community engagement and research forum. If you've not been to one of those, watch for the announcements. We take up topics around community engagement. It's a great place to connect with people that are doing this kind of work. We have annually our immersion training and community engagement for folks that really want to get bone up their skills and capacity in doing community engaged research. We do some customized trainings for teams as well. And along with our pilot grants, we provide a lot of technical assistance and coaching. This is our website. If you're interested in reaching out or engaging with us or learning more about our services, I'd encourage you to check it out. It's at cctsi.cuanschutz.edu, and we're just one of the pull downs off the website. And I'm going to hand it to Montel to wrap us up here.
Sure. So we have spent the last 15 years or so building a program that we think really works. And there are lots of reasons for that. Our relationships are based on long-term interactions and engagement with communities. So, our community research liaisons, for example, many of them have been with us for 15 years. And so we've really nurtured those relationships. We have access to a lot of researchers on various campuses within various affiliate organizations who have specific expertise in community engaged research, so we can make connections there. Again, we have our trusted relationships with our community research liaisons. We have access to primary care practices with lots of expertise on the ground there. And we can really engage diverse voices from lots of different communities across the state. I will say that specific to those types of needs you might have in terms of recruitment or reaching out to different communities and diverse communities, we have community research liaisons who speak lots of different languages. So that's also something to note if you are in a place where you're stuck and could use some assistance. We're happy to help. And we have, again, funding and institutional support through the CCTSI. So all of these offerings that Dawn just went through, many, if not all, are free to folks at the university. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dawn and Montel. I'd like to open the floor to any questions. Please feel free to put questions in the chat or to unmute yourself. And you can also add questions in the chat as presentations continue if you think of them as we go. I will go ahead and turn over the floor to our next speaker, Deb McAllister, who will be telling us about PRMS today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Deb McAllister, and I have the privilege of working at the University of Colorado Cancer Center, serving as the program director for the protocol review and monitoring system. And so throughout this talk, I'll refer to it as PRMS for short. So today I was asked to talk to you about what we do, and pretty much in our title, we review and monitor. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next 10 minutes or so. First, let me just describe our cancer center here at University of Colorado. So we are the only NCI designated cancer center in the state of Colorado. Our catchment area is the state of Colorado population, although I realize, and we all realize, that patients come from various other states also to be treated here at our center. So a little bit about the NCI designation. The NCI Cancer Centers program was created as part of the National Cancer Act of 1971. It's one of the anchors of the nation's cancer research effort. And so through this program, the NCI recognizes centers around the country that meet rigorous standards for transdisciplinary, state-of-the-art research focused on developing new and better approaches for prevention, diagnosing, and treating cancer. So as a cancer center, we receive federal funding. At the current time, there are 54 comprehensive cancer centers around the country, and we became a comprehensive designation in 1997. So at our center, there are a number of entities that fall under our umbrella. UC Health, patients that are seen at UC Health, Children's Hospital Colorado, the VA, CSU, University of Colorado Boulder. Any research that's conducted at the cancer research that's conducted at these entities must go through our committee for review. I just like to show this slide. It's a picture of our cancer center leadership taken in May of 2021, right after our NCI site visit. So in order to receive the federal funding that we get, we have to undergo a highly competitive process by our peer reviewers around the country. And this happens every 5 years. So the site visitors come on our site and they scrutinize everything that we do as a cancer center. We're essentially, it takes us upwards of a year to really get ready for this visit, and it's just a ton of work. And our PRMS is audited and scrutinized, and you can see by the smiles on our faces that we're pretty happy that the visit is over. After the visit, the NCI gives us a score, And at this particular visit, we had actually received one of the best scores in the history of our center. So it's really a testament to all the hard work done by not only our Cancer Center leaders, but also really all of us, our clinical research staff and teams, our coordinators, our nurses, regulatory people, really everyone who's part of our center. This just shows the organizational chart for our PRMS. I have two really great coordinators that really run the day-to-day operations. Anisha Henningham and Shannon Henderson help me out with the day-to-day operations, and I report up to Cindy O'Brien as our PRMS chair. Kelly Falk is a pediatric oncologist. She's over at Children's, and she's our deputy chair, and we all roll up under Dr. Schulich. So getting back to the nitty-gritty, what do we actually do? So as a federally funded cancer center, the NCI requires that each cancer center has a protocol review monitoring system, or a PRMS. It's really an integral component of the clinical research that's performed at our institution. So what is it that we do? We focus on evaluating the scientific merit, the priorities and feasibility of a study, as well as the progress of each clinical protocol. So scientific merit, we are reviewing each protocol to make sure that the protocol is scientifically sound, that there's well-defined objectives and endpoints, that the statistics make sense. We really want to ensure that the clinical research that's done at our center and that we open here is really top-notch. So that really is one of the primary purposes of our committee, is to evaluate the scientific merit of the research being conducted here. We're also looking at the priorities and feasibility of a study. Does the protocol meet institutional priorities and cancer center priorities? And can that study actually be done at our center? And then finally, the progress, because we're looking at progress in terms of, is the study enrolling patients at a good rate? Because obviously you can't answer the scientific research question that you're asking if we're not enrolling patients to the study. Any protocol with a cancer-related focus or studying a cancer population is required to be submitted to our committee, to PRMS. This includes observational studies, chart reviews, prevention, survivorship, treatment studies, the whole gamut, really. I wanted to share this just to show that we review each study and give it a priority score based on certain objective measurements, such as who's the sponsor of the study, who's funding the study, is it industry, is it grant funded, what's the phase of the study, was the translational work done here at our center, are there competing studies? Obviously, if we're opening studies here at our center that compete with other studies, we're going to have a difficult time potentially enrolling and finishing our enrollment goals to each of the studies. And then finally, does the study target underrepresented minorities specifically or not? How are we set up? As part of PRMS, we have two main committees. On the right, the Scientific Review Committee is made up of about 25 members, primarily physicians, PhDs, biostatisticians. This is the committee that reviews the interventional protocols that are submitted to us. So this committee meets twice a month, and the committee formally votes on whether to approve a study or not. And remember, they're evaluating the scientific merit and feasibility of the study. On the left is our executive committee. It's a smaller committee made up of about 7 members, several whom have led the PRMS in the past, and they really provide valuable historical knowledge for how to conduct ourselves. This committee really it's responsible for evaluating any changes that PRMS might need to make in how we conduct ourselves. They are also the group that reviews studies for low accrual and vote on whether to close these low accruing studies. So this committee meets quarterly. Getting back to the nitty-gritty of PRMS, what is our scientific review committee looking at when they review a protocol? Well, they're actually looking at the protocol from front to back. they're looking at the objectives and endpoints. What's the study design? Who's the study? What population is being studied? What are the interventions and assessments? And then the statistical considerations. How are we notified of studies here at the Cancer Center? As you all know, any study that you want to conduct here at Anschutz Medical Campus must fill out the HSR, the Human Subjects Research Portal form that's built in REDCap. And there's a question on that form that says, is this study evaluating a cancer-related question or a cancer population? If you answer yes to that, you're instructed at the end of the form to also submit your information to our PRMS form. We try not to duplicate too many of the questions so that you're not having to fill out the same question over and over. But our form is also, it's also built in REDCap. So because the scientific review of a protocol, it's really imperative that the scientific merit is evaluated. The scientific approval actually needs to occur before the study moves to the IRB for review. So this is just really, this slide is just really a reminder to show that the PRMS review has to occur first. Our focus, as I've described here, I think you've heard probably enough to know that our focus is different than the IRB, where the IRB is primarily evaluating the protection of research subjects, whereas PRMS evaluates scientific merit. Taking a few steps back, how does a team actually decide whether or not to participate in a trial? In the Cancer Center, most of our teams are made up by disease-based teams. So breast cancer team, GU team, GI team. So we have a bunch of teams. They're called disease-based teams. So the first step is that the team might receive a new protocol that might be given to the PI or a research manager, the disease site leader, and the team essentially sits down monthly or sometimes more frequently, depending on the team itself, to take a look at the protocols that are offered to them, whether they be industry studies or other national groups types of studies. All types of studies are reviewed at this level. And they're looking at resource utilization. Do they have the staff to open the study? Is the scientific question even interesting? Is it something that they want to open here? Once they determine that they're interested in the study, the study is then submitted to PRMS. We receive it, we enter it into Encore, we make sure the details are correct because we do use Encore to report, we actually use Encore to report our study details and subject details to the NCI. So everything in Encore has to be correct. The study, once we receive it, is then triaged based on the type of study it is. So it could get expedited or PRMS chair review, or it could potentially go to our full board. So studies that go to full board can receive one of 4 potential voting outcomes. The study could be outright approved, could be approved with stipulations, approved with modifications, or disapproved. So here is a typical year for studies that have gone to our full board for review. So in one calendar year, we reviewed 123 protocols at full board. You can see here a majority of them were actually outright approved. 82 out of the 123 were outright approved. 26 got stipulations, meaning stipulations just means that our committee has some questions about the protocol. We don't need actual modifications, but we have some clarifying questions that we need answered before we will provide approval. Modifications means that our committee would like the study to be modified before we actually will approve it. And then disapproval. So we don't like to disapprove too many studies. And actually, if a study is disapproved, we spell out in our disapproval letter exactly what needs to be changed in order for the study to move forward to approval. So there is the opportunity for the PI to resubmit disapproved protocol. Okay, underrepresented population. So one of the newer requirements that the NCI added to our list of monitoring responsibilities is to evaluate each study for the potential to accrue underrepresented populations to our protocols, and also to monitor the demographic makeup of our study accrual. So we evaluate each individual study at our scientific review committee to ensure that the inclusion-exclusion criteria is appropriate and inclusive of all demographic populations. So there's a number of questions that we ask on our review form so that each of the reviewers can provide their feedback on whether they believe that the study is inclusive to all demographic populations. And then on the reporting side, we group this data by disease site and provide the data to our principal investigators every 6 months. So what you're seeing here is, these are sort of stock graphs, but this would be actually what we would actually provide these graphs every 6 months to our principal investigators, showing them what is their race and ethnicity makeup of the patients enrolling on their clinical trials, as well as the age, gender, and rurality. This has really sort of helped our principal investigators kind of see by disease-based team what is their demographic makeup. We also provide them with data on who's walking in the door. Since most of our patients are seen at UC Health, we have the ability to provide that data so that the teams can actually compare who's walking in the door and is it matching their demographic makeup of patients who are enrolled in clinical trials. So switching gears, low accrual. So we do have study metrics that we have metrics that we expect the PI to enroll in the study. So if they're not meeting those metrics, then PRMS has the fun job of reaching out to the principal investigator and asking why they're not meeting those certain metrics. So, so what are those actual metrics? So at the time of a study that the study is submitted to us, the PI is required to tell us how many patients that they expect to enroll to the entire study and how long enrollment will last. So for example, if they expect to enroll 40 patients over 2 years, we are looking at the annual goal, which would be 20 patients over 1 year. And the expectation that we have is that they would, the PI would have to enroll at least 50% of what they said they would enroll annually. So that they would need to enroll at least 10 patients on that study. We pull all of these numbers out of ENCORE and run our low accrual reports out of ENCORE. So we don't like to close studies. No one likes to close studies because there's so much time and effort that goes into opening a study, as you all know. One of the things we don't like to do is close a study. So we ask the PI to give justification for keeping the study open and reasons. We ask them why is a study low accruing, and oftentimes that prompts them to kind of focus more on that study so that the enrollment can potentially improve. These are snapshots of publications from our investigators, or our principal investigators here at the University of Colorado Cancer Center. These projects were essentially conceived by our PIs, reviewed by PRMS, opened, enrolled, closed, and published. So that really is our goal, right? As a cancer center, it's to continue moving science forward. So this is what obviously we like to see at our center. Just like Don talked about earlier, we also have a website, PRMS. If you Google PRMS Colorado, you should come right to our website. It lists all the important submission forms, information on how to submit to us, deadlines, meeting dates, really everything that I kind of covered here as well within this talk. And that is really it for me. It's a lot about what we do. I'm happy to take any questions that you all might have.
Thank you so much, Deb. And
Sure.
again, feel free to put questions in the chat or to unmute yourself. Everyone's a little shy today. That's okay. If you think of questions, as mentioned, you can put them in the chat at any time. We do have another speaker, Tiffany Cull, and Stacy Grolnick will be here to talk to us about creating SOPs. So I will go ahead and turn over the floor to you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Gemma. Let me get my slides going here. Let's see here. And okay. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Wonderful, thank you. So I know that, based on the poll, this is a very experienced group. We've got a lot of people that have been at the university a long time and have been in the clinical research game for a long time, regardless clinical, regulatory, or administration. So I'll just keep this very short and sweet. So today we wanted to talk about standard operating procedures. And I think the best way to do that is for us to actually let's see here. Tell a little story. Well, first I want to just get out some definitions. Just like a good SOP is written, you want to start with your definitions, your abbreviations, so everybody knows what you're talking about. So many of you, I'm sure, if you don't have SOPs or have written SOPs, you've used them or referenced them. It's just a set of written instructions describing your process, really. And there's numerous benefits to that. The most important one being actual written documentation of what the proper procedure is. It's consistency, it's standardization, it provides guidance and training, and basically which ensures a better level of compliance when everybody understands what needs to be done, and not necessarily what needs to be done. An SOP is more addressing the how. So just a little bit about SOPs versus policies versus guidance documents. When you're thinking about writing SOPs, it's important to keep in mind what level of compliance that you're after, essentially. For the Cancer Center and OCRIS, as we'll be describing later, we mainly stayed at the SOP level. There were a few existing policies at the university, at the campus level, or the school medicine level, and those were our guidance to where we needed to go to define those further. As a regulatory person, policy is also your federal regulations. So a lot of the Cancer Center SOPs we developed were around regulations. So you have your policy and your SOP, which is a requirement to be followed. And then departments also can develop guidance documents and work instructions under those. And that's just a refining of the process. And I would say a further specialization of how that particular group or department is going to make sure that that SOP is carried out. And then work instructions can just be your checklists, basically. I don't know. What else is it? What else besides a checklist? Note cards? So I wanted to start with telling a little bit of a story, because as I mentioned, so many of you are familiar with SOPs, but what really is the impetus sometimes for having to develop SOPs? So back in 2016, OCRIST, then CPDM, as was tasked with SOP development for the Cancer Center at large. So all oncology research across the various departments in the Cancer Center. On top of that, the IIT team, which sits inside OCRIST, was very new. We were barely a year old, and so we needed SOPs to help guide us to how we were going to open, run, close our investigator-initiated trials. So now I want to turn it over to Stacy for just a sec to talk about what she did specifically when she was working at the Cancer Center level in development of SOPs. So Stace, if you're...
Yeah, thanks, Tiff. So this was, first of all, when I was tasked with this, I was like, well, number one, I'm not doing this on my own. So, you know, I had worked under SOPs in lots of my work as a oncology research nurse over years, but had never actually written any. So, so what I first did was actually pulled together sort of a work group to help me tackle this. If we were going to need to write some SOPs that covered a variety of different research teams in a variety of different departments, I need some buy-in, some participation for that. So we pulled in some representation from our clinical teams, regulatory, administration, and compliance, particularly our data safety monitoring committee. And then that work group, small work group, really sort of took on the task of kind of identifying what SOPs we needed. And as Tiffany said, we really started with looking what was already out there. We didn't want to duplicate any work that was already in existence. So we looked at policy or SOPs that were already available through the Massachusetts Medical Campus, Office of Regulatory Research Compliance, COMERB, and others, just to kind of see what was already out there. And then we sort of defined our set of policy or SOPs that we wanted to write. We also created templates so that we could standardize sort of the output, our deliverables. So we developed an SOP template, a guidance document, and a work instruction, so that if we sort of decided we were going to be writing an SOP, which is mostly what we wrote, we were all following to a similar template. And then we chose to kind of assign primary reviewers or primary authors, excuse me, and then the work group act as kind of a collective review panel. So we then would review each other's work and sort of come to kind of a final sort of version before we would sort of move on to our next steps that we define in our approval process.
Awesome, thank you. So meanwhile, Stacy's working on the Cancer Center SOPs with all of the major players. But concurrently, we were also developing our SOPs for OCRIST. And we decided to tackle that a little bit differently. Instead of kind of identifying the lack or the need first, we actually went and defined all of our processes first. So we did some workflow maps, which actually are really fun if you're a visual learner. And it's, you just get in a group and it's kind of just shout out, okay, what do we do next? What do we do next? And that was incredibly helpful, because then when you see it all laid out, then you could see what your hurdles were, what your compliance pain points were, places that there was little consistency across clinical teams or across regulatory teams. So we did it a little bit differently for OCRIST than we did for the Cancer Center, but so first tip on SOPs is really to make an SOP on SOPs. We sometimes refer to our OCRIST one as the SOP squared, or whatever what a clever name you want to give it, but it very much helps to define what your process is going to be for actually how you develop it, how you review it, how you approve it, and then also where it lives. Simple things like that, where you want people, if the SOP is to be effective, it must be available, widely available, so that people can reference it. And so you want to think about those other things as in terms of how you're going to distribute them to the team. Are you going to store them? And then if you're training your teams on your SOPs, how do you want to do that? So this is kind of, and it kind of is a nice primer, because it warms you up into like writing big SOPs, like responsibilities of investigators, or, you know, deviations in ENCORE, kind of some of those bigger topics that have a lot more components to them. So yeah, just Stace, I'll take this one if you want. But yeah, so basically once the work group had kind of done, you know, their charge, they would adopt a 2-week open comment period before actually finalizing it. So send it out to every member of the Cancer Center, which was nice because, you know, different if you were primarily a regulatory person that authored the SOP. Distributing to your clinical teams might give you some helpful feedback and vice versa. And then obviously we routed the SOPs to Cancer Center leadership for approval. And then they were distributed, obviously, to the research managers and then disseminated down through the teams. And then we keep our Cancer Center SOPs on our UCC SOP shared drive so that they're available to everyone. So success, we've come a long way, baby. And in just our short time here, the Cancer Center Work Group wrote and distributed 17 SOPs and 6 guidance documents. OCRIS, we've also been busy, 16 SOPs, 37 guidance documents, and 7 work instructions. And we're just, we also have reconvened a work group just to refine our process for revising SOPs on an annual or biannual basis, updating templates, and also addressing any questions about documentations of training. A couple more tips and tricks. I think the best one is to just Google it, because there's no point in reinventing a wheel, and many academic medical centers have their SOPs available publicly on their website, which is, that's, I feel, appropriate. We're in academia. The whole point is to share and get better, is not be as proprietary as industry. So also look again to what already exists on campus here, Office of Research Compliance, the source, and then also your clinical research communities. For cancer, we have the American Association of Cancer Institutes, if I'm saying that correctly. And that is just a collective of a bunch of academic medical centers doing cancer research. So they have a listserv and they have an annual conference. It's kind of like a big group therapy for everyone that works in cancer research. And it's very helpful. But really, many of you are, what you would consider kind of your top tier institutions like Dana-Farber, Memorial Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson, all those places have their stuff up online, Yale, Duke, and it's really, it's very helpful. So did you want to add anything? Any tips or tricks, Stace? Anything I didn't cover?
No, I think, that's the biggest thing is these are what we found through both of our efforts, both at the campus cancer center level and with OCRIS, is really engaging experts, that you work with, engage your colleagues in this work, have people review. And then what we're finding is sort of, and that we set up a every 2-year review cycle. So really, some are easy, right? And they don't need changes, but then you really do, as the environmental research changes, we do need to keep our SOPs up to date. So I think, sort of having that, whether it be just a peer group, a core group that helps to work on some of this, is really, really important, because doing it as one person or sort of as a single entity can be really difficult and be almost too heavy of a lift. So, and I think, as reiterating what Tiff said, just sort of borrowing from what's already out there, even if you find an SOP that's really specific to another institution, a lot of language can be used, to adopt for your institution, and sort of wordsmithed or crafted to sort of customize for our institution or our cancer center. And that made a huge difference in us being able to sort of execute and write some of these SOPs in a fairly short time frame from when we started in 2016.
Awesome. It's definitely hard to do SOP work because it's basically work on top of your work. If you're familiar with the Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, it's definitely Q2 work that you really have to try to set aside for, but it's kind of one of those things. If you don't get the SOP down, if you don't get those processes consistent and in writing, you're really just setting yourself up to fail. So ounce of prevention, pound of cure, right?
I think one of the other things that we've benefited from the work is when a sponsor, we have a lot of industry sponsored trials, of course, in the Cancer Center. When a study sponsor would ask about a specific procedure, we could often cite an SOP. And so instead of them sort of like mandating how we do things, we could actually say, well, we've already got this guidance in place, or we've got this SOP in place. And then that is often helps us kind of do business the way we want to versus the way the sponsor is expecting us to. So that's been a lot of help in a lot of instances when we're undergoing maybe a sponsor review or monitoring visits or even site selection. And we do share our policy when asked. We don't have them on a public facing website. They're all internally available, but we do share them when asked by sponsors.
Awesome. Well,
I'm happy to take any questions if there's anything.
Yeah, totally. Any questions? Stop sharing.
There is a question in the chat asking if you guys would mind sharing your slides. If you're comfortable sending those to me, I can share those.
Of course.
Absolutely, no problem.
Thank you. Any other questions? Got a little bit of time left. Well, I thank you so much to all of our wonderful speakers today. A lot of great information. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the clinical research operations and services website. So if any of your colleagues weren't able to join, they can watch the recording there. And this will be our last Clinical Research Connection meeting for this year. We will resume back in January on January 16th. So please join us again then and have a wonderful rest of your year. I will go ahead and give everybody a few minutes of your time.